Hallelujah. Thine the glory. Revive us again. Well, good day to you, brothers and sisters. Gonna show you something cool as always. Today I have for you a very in-depth study about the signs in the sun, moon, and stars, as well as the shaking of the heavens and the earth during the day of the Lord. I would say most people who study these things don't realize that there's actually three signs in the sun, moon, and stars during the day of the Lord. Three times. And if that's totally new to you and you just don't think I'm even in the ballpark, stay with me. I'm going to prove it to you using the Word of God. Now, I've been studying these signs and these passages in the 70th week of Daniel now for about 8 years and been doing videos on this subject for 5 years or so. And I add to my understanding every year. So I've probably got two or three new verses here for you that you haven't seen before if you've watched my studies over the years of the 70th week, and got some additional understanding, and I want to impart it on you. And this is a really nice, I hope you like this, brothers and sisters. This is a really nice one-page document that's got everything you want to know where it's at if you want to properly teach the day of the Lord in regards to the signs in the sun, moon, and stars. Here it is. Let's get deep into Father's Word. The first sign in the sun, moon, and stars is at the sixth seal. The second time that there is signs in the sun, moon, and stars during the day of the Lord is the fourth trumpet. And the third time during the day of the Lord that we have signs in the sun, moon, and stars is at the appearing of Jesus Christ, King of kings and Lord of lords, at the seventh bowl. So it's three signs in the sun, moon, and stars. You got to start with that knowledge. And when you do this and when you understand this, now you can get your timeline together. You understand what's going on in Revelation 6. Now, I've got a lot of verses to go over that's going to help you, but let's start this process of finally understanding. Joel 2 versus Joel 3 versus Matthew 24 versus Zephaniah versus Revelation 6, and things just seem like the Bible can't contradict itself, and you're having trouble because I know I've been there, and all of a sudden you realize there's a contradiction and the Bible cannot contradict itself, and you're trying to line everything up. And until you realize that the Bible is telling us there are three times that these signs take place, until you understand that, you're going to eventually stop your study and give up because just things don't line up if you think it just happens one time. Let's start with the sixth seal. I've got the when is the event, what is the event, and where are the verses that refer to the first sign. I've got them down here in this left block. All right, so we're going to start reading from the top of the block, come down, and then we're going to look at all of these passages. And you can watch this study in parts if you want. But I think once we get started and you realize that this crazy brother Waite might actually know what he's talking about, it's going to be hard to put this down and pause it and come back to it later. Especially if you're one of those that's been given the desire by Father to learn these things. And it's a period of years with the Holy Spirit with you at your side every step of the way. Sixth seal. As Jesus was betrayed, so shall Israel be betrayed if they don't return to the Lord. If they don't return to the Lord by the time Jesus, the worthy Lamb, looses the sixth seal, then they shall be betrayed. Have we already been told in advance, even though Father will give them the opportunity, that they won't take it? And we have already been told that. And I was thinking about that again this morning. I'm like, how do we know for sure? Is there still hope? Is there still a chance that they will listen to the good counsel between the persecuted Christians and the two witnesses? Is there still hope that Israel will return to Father and accept Jesus as their Messiah and rebuke the Antichrist? During the fifth seal, is there still a chance? And then the Lord, or I should say, specifically the Holy Spirit, brought it to remembrance what 2 Thessalonians 2, that before the day of Christ, right, those 42 months of the falling away must happen first. Okay, now the Bible doesn't say in 2 Thessalonians 2, 42 months, but we know from other scriptures that the 42 months of great tribulation, when the falling away from the words of Jesus, from the faith of Jesus, from the church, we know that that period of time is 42 months long. So because of 2 Thessalonians 2, I think Father is telling us, yes, he's going to he's going to use Elijah and the other witness, I believe, who is Moses, right? During their first year and some days of their 42 months of testimony. And we'll get into where I found the year and some days length to the fifth seal. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, that first year and some days of the two witnesses, 42 months of witnessing and testimony and giving of good counsel to Israel. Because of 2 Thessalonians 2, I think it's safe to say that the fathers told us in advance they will not take that opportunity. So who is it that betrays Israel at the sixth seal? And you might say, are you saying God betrays the apple of his eye? No, in regards to betraying, it's the nations who surround Israel, Israel's evil neighbors, who's going to betray her. The ones who signed the covenant with death with her at the first seal, that covenant of death of Isaiah 28:18. Right? Those nations will plot evil against the Lord and his people, and they'll use sinister schemes and crafty counsel and wicked plans. And they shall all come against Israel at one time when the sixth seal is loosed, a year and some days after the fifth seal abomination of desolation event. They are the ones betraying Israel. The members who signed, or at least some of the members who signed the covenant with death league agreement of Daniel 11:23 and Isaiah 28:18. Continuing on, reading downward on the left block. Because Israel and the world will not listen to the good counsel Father will send them, Father will now, starting at the sixth seal, not listen to them, Israel or the world, as they cry out to him and roll around in the ashes. Now this is Israel that's going to be donning sackcloth and rolling around in the ashes, pleading to Yah, the Holy One of Israel, saying, we know, we can tell, we know we're under attack, and we can tell based on the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars, as well as the earth shaking and a quaking and the heavens trembling at your presence, we can tell that the appointed time of the end of Israel has come. And they're going to begin the process. It's a 3-year-long process almost. I'll tell you how I came up with that. As far as the length of the day of the Lord, where they are crying out, calling out to Father. And Father's saying, hey, I sent you good counsel during the fifth seal. You didn't listen. You didn't take heed. You ignored me and the counsel that I sent you. And you accepted evil counsel. Right? So Father is saying, during the day of the Lord, until I'm done with these determined desolations, until Jesus or a loud voice comes before the throne in Revelation 16:17, it is done. Israel, until your purging is completed, until the power of the holy people has been completely broken and shattered, Daniel 12:7, Daniel 9:24, until that happens, I will not relent, because you failed to repent during the fifth seal. So that's what's going on. They're betrayed. Israel shall be betrayed by its signatures, what's that word? Signatories? The ones who signed the league agreement, her evil neighbors, will come against her at the sixth seal. But Father controls the day that that happens. Are you listening, brothers and sisters? Father's the one who comes and visits his people. And where is that at? Hosea 5, especially verses 14 and 15. Well, I have Hosea 5 right here for you. And in Hosea 5, Father's talking about the day of the Lord that comes and how he's going to visit his flock. That's why the heavens will shake and the earth will move out of her place at the sixth seal. And we're also told in Isaiah 13 that not only will the heavens shake and the earth move out of her place at the sixth seal, Isaiah 13, especially verse 13 of Isaiah 13, how's that for numbers? Says that Father's going to do it again when Jesus comes at the seventh bowl during the wrath of the Lamb. Okay? So, in Isaiah 13:13, just by itself, we're told that these signs and the shaking will happen twice. The first time is at the presence of Father. No one will be able to make out him, but you can feel his presence. And then it'll be at the appearing of Jesus Christ on the last day at the seventh bowl. That'll be the worst earthquake of all time in human history. So continuing on with the sixth seal, the start to the appointed time of the end, the start of the day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord comes in two phases, brothers and sisters. It's the punishment on Israel primarily. That's the wrath of him who sits on the throne. But phase 2 starts when Jesus appears, and now Jesus will muster his army for battle, the armies of heaven, and he will go out and fight. And it's called the wrath of the Lamb when Jesus comes like a thief to steal back what is going to be stolen from him during phase 1 of the day of the Lord that comes like a thief when Father visits his people and puts the hook in the jaw of Gog the Assyrian of Ezekiel 38 and brings him southward and gives him the desire to pass through the land. In other words, Father's going to be using Gog the Assyrian as the staff of punishment to chastise the apple of his eye. Father's done that many times in the past. He's going to do it again, but this time he will use the Assyrian, the king of Assyria. And if you want to know where the final Antichrist shall come forth from, the Bible has told us all along. It's from Mosul, Al-Mazil, ancient Nineveh. That's I have it here for you, Nahum 1, verse 11. And it's also in Daniel 11, 40 through 45. But if you want to know exactly what city, you go to Nahum 1:11. That's why all the other passages in the Old Testament, such as Micah 5 and Isaiah 14, Isaiah 7 and 8, and many others, tell us that the final Antichrist will be an Assyrian, and Nahum 1:11 says he shall come forth from Mosul. And if there's any doubt in your mind that Nahum 1 is talking about the final Antichrist and not some past king of Assyria, you look at the last two verses of Nahum 1. 14 and 15, it makes it very clear we are talking about the final Antichrist shall come forth from Mosul, Al-Mazil, Iraq. When is the sixth seal going to take place? That's that day that only Father knows, when he's going to send Gog the Assyrian, the hired razor flying the bee army, southward to bring upon, to come upon Israel in the world with the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Okay. When does this day come upon Israel in the world? At the sixth seal. Only Father knows. And you might say, well, brother, you just said you know the length of the fifth seal. Well, I know what the Bible says about the length of the fifth seal. It says it in Isaiah 32:10. It talks briefly about it in verse 32 of Proverbs 1. It gets very specific in Isaiah 7:14 through 17, and in Isaiah 8, verses 3 and 4. And I've already pointed out to you, it's mentioned in Hosea 5, verses 13 through 15. Now, the sign itself is described in all of these passages, which we're going to go to in a second. This might be a long lesson. Revelation 6, Amos 8, Joel 2, Micah 3, Amos 5, Ezekiel 34, Ezekiel 30, Jeremiah 13, Jeremiah 23, Zephaniah 1, and Isaiah 13:13. You got to be careful because Isaiah 13:13a is the sixth seal, and Isaiah 13:13b is the seventh bowl wrath of the Lamb. Okay, and I've done a few studies on that, and I've got all the proof you need that in many places that talk about the day of the Lord, it breaks them up into phase 1 and phase 2, just like you see at the end of the sixth seal passage in Revelation 6. I'll show you real quick. Here we are in Revelation 6. Here's how the Bible alludes to the two phases. Verse 16, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne. That's phase 1. Here is the and that always separates phase 1 and phase 2. I've shown many verses. See my studies on that I keep at keepandshare.com. Many places. They always, when talking about phase 1 and phase 2 and using different titles, they always separate it with the and. And then this, of course, the wrath of the Lamb is talking about the climax of the day of the Lord that will come at the seventh bowl. But when it says, for the great day of his wrath has come, you need to understand, brothers and sisters, that's not talking about a 12-hour period. That's not talking about a 24-hour period. That's talking about Daniel 11:40 through 45. And if you want to know the length of the day of the Lord, you need to study the judgment on the country of Jordan. And in Isaiah 16, we're told that the time from the time that Jordan gets out of punishment, which you see in Daniel 11:41, 42, 43, when Jordan gets out of punishment until the time that it receives its punishment at the hands of Jesus at the battle of the great day of God Almighty, that is just under less than 3 years. See my study on that. Don't have time to get deep into that now, but that's the length of the day of the Lord. But only Father knows exactly how long it is, and only Father knows what day it starts. When Father puts the hook in the jaw and says, come southward down, and I need you to overflow the banks of the Euphrates River like a flood, head southwest towards Jerusalem, and when you get past Damascus, you need to decide, are you going to the right fork or the left fork to Ammon, or the right fork to Jerusalem when you're heading southwest from Assyria? And Father's going to put it into his heart to go right, to take the right fork to Jerusalem, attack Israel. Okay, I don't want to get sidetracked here. So let's look at the when. When is the sixth seal going to happen? Here's what the Bible tells us. A year and some days, that's a prophecy found in Isaiah 32, Isaiah 7, and Isaiah 8. A year and some days following the fifth seal, abomination of desolation, Father will bring the king of Assyria, Gog, the king mentioned in Nahum 1:11, Daniel 11:40 through 45. And he's also mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And you also need to see Isaiah 32:10, Proverbs 1:32, and Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8, as you see here, and Hosea 5. Let's go to these passages. But again, the official title of the prophecy is a year and some days, but it's described in more than one place. Why does Father choose to use the some days in the official title? Because only he knows. And you might say, well, brother, I think that no man knows the day or the hour is talking about the coming of Jesus at the seventh bowl. Well, it is true that Father is the only one that knows the exact day that he's bringing Jesus. That is true. However, Father has already told us the length of the bowls of wrath. Father's already told us. Not the length of the seventh bowl, but the 6 bowls leading up to the 7th bowl, last day of the age. He's already told us in Daniel 12 that that is a 45-day period from the 7th trumpet ascension of the 2 witnesses until Jesus is scheduled, according to Daniel 12, for 45 days. But due to the caveat of Matthew 24:22, we know that those days shall be shortened a little bit for the sake of the elect. And so no one knows whether it's going to be 40, 42, 44, 45 days. No one knows. Only Father knows in regards to the 7th bowl. However, since we know the length of the 6 bowls of wrath, as far as the scheduling of it by Father, we know that during that time, the My Assembly of Kingdoms of Zephaniah 3:8 has to take place. That is a lot of moving of military personnel and equipment and combat vehicles to the Valley of Armageddon, to the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And my point is, out of that 45 days that shall be shortened, the vast majority of that time is going to be needed to get mortal humans and their militaries to the valleys, because they don't even head that direction until the 7th trumpet. Okay? So my point is, when Father says I'm going to shorten those days, he's talking about shortening the 45 established days of the first 6 bowls of wrath by only a few days. And again, we know that because most of the 45 days must be used by Father to bring these militaries of the nations. They need that time. So it's not like the bowls of wrath, Father's going to shorten them to 10 days. He can't do it. He can't do it. He can do anything, but because it's up to humans to move, humans can only move so fast. Father can do anything. Okay, but that 45 days will probably be more closer to 40, not 30, not 20. So you're only talking about maybe a 5 or 10 day window. So when Father talks about no man knows the day or the hour, he's talking about judgment. He's talking about the whole day of the Lord. And you might say, well, you just said you know the length of the 5th seal is a year and some days. Yes, but I don't know whether that's 12 and a half months, 14 months, 17 months. See, it's a much bigger window. That's why I think the start of the day of the Lord is what Father's talking about when he brings the days of the coming of the Son of Man upon the world and begins to pour the cup of Jeremiah 25. Okay, so a year and some days, the official title, following the 5th seal, abomination of desolation. Father will bring the king of Assyria, Gog the king mentioned in Nahum 1:11, Daniel 11:40 through 45, and Ezekiel 38 and 39, against the land. Right? This is Gog of Magog, which might mean Al-Mazil, Iraq, or it could mean the Mount Ararat region. Any way you slice it, Scripture says that this final Antichrist, because in Nahum 1:15 it says there'll be no more Antichrist who ever pass through Israel again after this guy mentioned in verse 11 of Nahum 1. Those aren't my words, those are the Bible's. I may have paraphrased a little bit. Go check it out. But yeah, this year and some days is talking about Israel receiving good counsel and Israel receiving evil counsel. In other words, it's a test, right? Jesus said in Revelation 3, I'm bringing a test upon the earth called the hour of trial, right? On those who dwell on the earth. Well, that's Israel and the world's going to be tested. But Israel has to pass the test, which we've already been told they won't in 2 Thessalonians 2, but Israel has to pass the test by the end of the fifth seal, or Israel and the world will have to drink of the cup of madness, which climaxes with the wrath of the Lamb. It's real important that you understand that good counsel and evil counsel. You're going to see it again when we go to Isaiah 7 and 8, which is the sister chapters to Isaiah 32, which all three are describing the length of the fifth seal. Israel, you're going to be given good counsel. You're not going to accept it. You're going to accept the evil counsel. Now, let me ask you, brothers and sisters, who is giving Israel the evil counsel during this fifth seal period of the overall hour of trial test that Jesus spoke of? Who's going to give Israel the evil counsel? It'll be the Antichrist. It'll be the false prophet of the Antichrist and the image that speaks, that gives wicked counsel concerning the Antichrist. So Israel's going to be bombarded with evil counsel, but the good counsel is going to come from two groups of people. One is the two witnesses, and the other group are Christians, the church, especially those who are being abused and rounded up and brought before the priests and the judges and the magistrates and the mayors and the governors. Those Christians, especially those in Jerusalem and Israel who are going to be persecuted, are going to be giving Israel good counsel. But Israel, we know from 2 Thessalonians 2, let no man deceive you, because that falling away, which lasts for 42 months, which begins during the early days of the fifth seal, when the Antichrist begins to speak blasphemies and pompous words. That's Daniel 11:36 through 39. When he begins to speak it, but yeah, the falling away won't even stop till the seventh trumpet. So let's look at these scriptures here under the when. Let's go to Isaiah. Let's start with Nahum 1:11. This is the chapter and verse that everyone has overlooked, that actually tells you what city on the planet the final Antichrist will come from. Everyone claims that they know, and everyone's been thrown a curveball by the last 5 to 10 decades by some well-meaning folks who got off track and started thinking about the Antichrist coming from Europe, and it threw everyone off, and everyone missed this. They missed this entire chapter, and the whole chapter is about the wrath of the Lamb appearing of Jesus Christ. Okay, did you know that? This is Revelation 19. This is Revelation 16, verses 17 through 21. Isaiah 30, and I could go Isaiah 14. I can go on and on and on. Micah 4, Isaiah 41, Jeremiah 15:51. I can go on and on. So in Nahum 1, it flat out tells you that this one who shall come against Israel and plot sinister schemes, wicked plans, crafty counsel, plots evil plans against the Lord. He is the wicked counselor. Okay? It says from you, right? From you comes forth. Who's the you? Well, the whole chapter is about the wrath of the Lamb's judgment on Nineveh, right? The heart of the Assyrian kingdom. And you might say, well, brother, can't that be talking about a past historical event, right? Some past Assyrian king coming against Israel, like Sargon, or I pronounce it Sennacherib. Many people pronounce it different. But the answer is Nahum 1 tells us that he's talking about, the Word of God is talking about the final Antichrist. And that is right here. Okay. And it's interesting because right here it actually calls him the vile one. And that's exactly what Daniel 11:21 calls him in the New King James Version. Some versions call him this one, the despicable one, the wicked one. This is the vile one, called the wicked counselor. But watch. All right. For the wicked one, talking about this Assyrian who plots evil against the Lord, shall no more, right? The wicked one, Antichrist, shall no more pass through you. He, talking about that guy of Nahum 1:11, is utterly cut off. No more to ever pass through the land of Israel after this one. It makes sense because this is the wrath of the Lamb against Nineveh, Mosul. This is what Jesus and the armies of heaven are going to do to Mosul. And once you understand verses 14 and 15, then you go, oh my Lord, right? Affliction shall not rise up a second time. This is it. This is Jesus's vengeance on those, right, who stole his inheritance. That's it. From you, Nineveh. It's been there the whole time. All right. Got to speed things up a little bit. So that's what he's the one that comes. Well, now talking about the coming forth of the Antichrist, right? Now, let's not get sidetracked. We're talking about when the sixth seal comes, right? To start the day of the Lord. That's what we're talking about. And I said that this is the guy who's coming. See this right here? This is the guy who's coming. But you need to know that he shows up on the scene at the first seal, not at the sixth seal. He comes against Israel. He tricks Israel, right? A lot of Israel, not all Israel, is going to think he's the Messiah. And they're going to start bowing before him and giving him honor and worshiping him. Not all Israel. I would say no more than 2/3 at the most. But that's a lot. But he comes onto the scene at the first seal. He grows his caliphate. Then we know what happens at the fifth seal. That's the abomination of desolation. And now his caliphate's growing into a Babylonian-style kingdom. So, Daniel 11:40 through 45 is the day of the Lord. Did you know that about Daniel 11? You probably did. Probably no surprises there. That's the appointed time of the end. It's the end of my people, and it's also the end of the age. But it's the end of the last day isn't at the sixth seal. It begins that almost 3-year-long process. Let's go down to verse 40. At the time of the end, right? The appointed time of the end. We have the final battle between the king of the south and the king of the north. We know the king of the north comes forth from Mosul. So 40 through 45, and 45 is 45b right here is actually the battle of the great day of God Almighty. When that stone cut without hands, right? Jesus destroys the beast kingdom. Hallelujah. So this is the day of the Lord, 40 through 45. In fact, 40a is actually Jeremiah 46 and Isaiah 20. And it in Jeremiah 46, which is the match to Daniel 11:40a, it actually calls that final battle between the king of the south and the king of the north the day of the Lord. Did you know that? All right. Well, we're not going to go to Ezekiel 38:39. I think everyone's familiar with that. Let's go to the chapter that actually gives us the official title of the length of the fifth seal. Isaiah 32:10. Don't have time to read the whole chapter, but you need to. You need to read the whole chapter of everything I give you. In a year and some days you will be troubled, and that is talking about, it's not a coincidence, it's talking about the time of Jacob's trouble. Father's really upset at the complacent men and women. And in this chapter, he's really focusing on the complacent women who are going to sit by and just watch the churches burn down, going to watch the Christians being rounded up and persecuted and thrown in jail, and some of them killed for their faith, right, during the fifth seal. And Father's saying, okay, all right, I see what you're doing. I'm going to come and visit you, just like Hosea 5 says. And then I'm going to return back to heaven, my place, until you, Israel, acknowledges your offense. And Father lets us know that that ain't happening until the it is done is shouted in heaven at Revelation 16:17. Which makes sense because Jesus tells you in Revelation 16:15 that he's coming 2 verses later. He tells you that. Behold, I am coming as a thief. And you might say, well, see, the day of the Lord is just a seventh bowl event. No, it's not. That's phase 2 of the day of the Lord, the wrath of the Lamb, when Jesus sits to judge the nations that have come to him. And we're also in the threshing zone of Isaiah 27:12, and which is the extended borders, the millennial borders of Israel during the millennium, and that's Ezekiel 47 and 48. So a year and some days you will be troubled, you complacent women of Israel, for the vintage will fail, the gathering will not come. Tremble, you women who are at ease. Be troubled. This is the, didn't mean to do that. There we go. Yeah, that's talking about the time of Jacob's trouble. Isaiah 32:10. Strip yourselves, make yourselves bare, and gird sackcloth on your waist. Brothers and sisters, we're going to go to Amos 8 here in a second, and that's exactly what that's talking about, the appointed time of the end of Amos 8 and Ezekiel 7, okay, and Daniel 11:40, the appointed time of the end. Hallelujah. Now you might say, well, I didn't need all of this. I just want to know where the scripture references are for the 3 signs in the sun, moon, and stars. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope you'll stay with me for the rest of this. But the answer to your question, if you ain't got time and you just want to know where they're right here. Here's the 6th seal. Here's the 7th bowl. And here is the 4th trumpet, which is actually the 2nd of the 3 signs in the sun, moon, and stars. Right? Revelation 8:12 is Ezekiel 5:12. And it signifies that 1/3 of Israel is about to go into captivity. All right, for those of you who are going to make the time to stay with me, let's continue on. So let's go to Proverbs 1:32. Now this verse I didn't actually find until just a couple days ago, and I about fell off my chair. verse 32, right? The very first chapter in Proverbs is talking about the fifth seal. Yeah, I mean, it's for every generation, but it's really talking about the appointed time of the end and the fifth seal that leads up to it. That final test when God casts Satan to earth and everyone's being bombarded with wicked counsel. And the Christians and the two witnesses are giving the good counsel. And everyone's trying to figure out who's the Messiah, who's God. Should I take the mark? Should I not take the mark of the beast? Right? Obviously, the beast isn't going to call it the mark of the beast. Right? Are you Jesus? Are you Jesus? Who's Jesus? Who's the Messiah? You know, who should I bow before? Everyone's trying to figure it all out. Right? Of course, they need to just simply listen to the Christians and the Holy Bible. But that's what Proverbs 1 is about, that fifth seal test where the wise choose the good counsel and the foolish ones, okay, the simple ones, I'm not being mean, that's what the Bible calls them. It does. It even calls them fools right here in verse 22. So when you get down here to verse 32, in reference to the fifth seal test, it says, "For the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them." Right? "But whoever listens to me," talking about to my good counsel, when I have Christians plead my case, right? You need the world, especially Israel, needs to listen to the Christians who are going to plead the case of God. That's why Christians will still be here. And if I upset the majority of you, I pray you'll stick around and receive the rest of this study on the three signs and the sun, moon, and stars. So, "But whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil." Okay, that dwell safely is talking about the dwell safely of Ezekiel 38 and 39 in regards to the millennial reign of Christ. Because that 1/3 of Israel, mortal Israel, which will not be changed into immortal bodies, will rule and reign with Christ. So will we from Jerusalem, and they will be his servants. Read Ezekiel 40 through 48. All right. So the turning away of the simple, meaning falling away from God and his son Jesus and the commandments of God, falling away and falling for the false Messiah, the Antichrist, the one that comes forth from Mosul. "And the complacency of fools will destroy them," right? That's what we're reading about. So Isaiah 32 is just simply details about what is meant in Proverbs 1:32 in regards to the fifth seal. Anyways, 32's match, and I thought that was pretty cool. And the main Antichrist figure of Daniel 11 is found in verse 11 of Nahum 1. That also is pretty cool. Now, sister chapters Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8, sister chapters of Isaiah 32, which has prophecies within them concerning the length of the fifth seal, which is called the prophecy of a year and some days in Isaiah 32, but it's described a little differently in Isaiah 7 and 8, but it's still talking about the length of time of the testing during the fifth seal before the king of Assyria is brought upon the land. So don't think Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8 is actually only like a past fulfillment. Oh no, the primary fulfillment is the future fulfillment of Isaiah 7 and 8 at the year and some days leading up to the start of the appointed time of the end. Let's go to Isaiah 7:14 through 17. Brothers and sisters, I'm getting a little tired myself, so pray for me right now, please. I want to try to finish all of this in one video. Strengthen me, Holy Spirit. Let's go to Isaiah 7. Now, there are two prophecies found just in Isaiah 7 alone, but in regards to the length of the fifth seal, it's the second of two prophecies. It's called the Emmanuel prophecy by the New King James Version folks. Okay, but I call it the title given in Isaiah 32, which is talking about the same subject. I call it the year and some days. And because if you just simply use what the New King James Version folks called this prophecy in Isaiah 7, which is also found in Isaiah 8, if you call it the Emmanuel prophecy, you haven't taught anyone anything. But when you call it by the name in Isaiah 32, you're giving understanding to the actual length of the fifth seal, which is what this is talking about. You're giving understanding by picking the right title. A year and some days I will visit you, O complacent women of Israel, right? So you're actually teaching someone when you choose the right title. but I don't mean to give the New King James Version folks a hard time, because that's my favorite version of the Bible. So where's it at here in Isaiah 7? Right here. Then he said, Hear now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will you weary my God also? Therefore, when God says that, a wise man will stop and listen. A fool, a simple person, will continue on with what they were doing in regards to the cares of the world. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Starting to sound a little bit like Revelation 12, isn't it? And shall call his name Emmanuel. Curds and honey he shall eat, that he may know to refuse the evil. Hello, we're talking about counsel during the fifth seal. He may know to refuse the evil counsel. Right? I'm throwing my own words in there. I pray that you're seeing the word of God on the screen and not just listening to me. He may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. Okay? Is that just saying, hey, in your lifetime, boys and girls, always choose good, refuse evil, and things will go well with you? No. No, no, no. This is a future fulfillment about the appointed time of the end, when Father brings the day of the Lord upon Israel and the world, and he starts it by bringing King of Assyria, Gog, upon the land to pass through the land and act as Father's staff of punishment. Okay? That's the subject here. Don't ever forget that. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good. Did you see that? For before. What is this? This is a length of time. The child shall know to refuse evil and choose the good. This is a length of time prophecy. Ask yourself, when a child is born, until it gets old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. In other words, the age of the child when you got to start tapping the hand and looking them in the eye and going, no. How old is a child? The child is just a little over 12 months, a year and some days. That's why Father, the Word of God, chose, okay, you could say God, the Word of God, chose to use this in regards to a length of time prophecy. And if you think, well, maybe that's what this is about, maybe it's not, right? Because what happens when that time is up, the appointed time of the end? What happens at the appointed time of the end, according to Daniel 11:40 through 45? This right here. That's how you know you're supposed to match this up with Daniel 11:40 through 45. The Lord will bring the king of Assyria upon you and your people, right? Daniel 12:7. And your father's house, days that have not come since the day that Ephraim departed from Judah. This is talking about the time in the future that all the prophets warned about, and it's the time of Jacob's trouble, right? That curse from the song of Moses on the last generation of Israel. Here it comes. And then you see Joel 2. This is Joel 2. Father calling Gog's, G-O-G, Gog's army, his army, God's army. You might say, oh, wait a minute, brother. What are you up to? You doing the work of the enemy? No, go to Joel 2 and you'll see Father calls his staff of punishment, Gog the Assyrian, possessed by Satan, uses him, and God calls it his own army against his own people, like a rod chastising a child. That's what it says. The Lord, this is Joel 2, himself will whistle for the fly that is in the farthest part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria, right? And you might say, well, I thought the king of the south is fighting the king of the north. Oh, no, this occurs a few months after that final battle, and now whoever's left alive from the southern alliance is now, just like Isaiah 20 says, is now fighting for the Antichrist. And here they come. This is Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Lottie, Dottie, everybody. It's the appointed time of the end. That league agreement is annulled. Here they come. All right? The day the Lord will shave his own people. Now, Isaiah 8, you see here on this short study, verses 3 and 4, is the prophecy that I call, and Isaiah 32 calls, the year and some days. I wouldn't call it the Emmanuel prophecy. Here we go. Then I went to the prophetess. This is Isaiah. And she conceived and bore a son. We know what that means. Then the Lord said to me, call his name Maher-shalal-hash-baz. For before the child shall have knowledge to cry. Oh, there's that for before again. You with me? This is a length of time prophecy concerning the length of the fifth seal. Before the child shall have knowledge to cry, Dada and Mama, my father, my mother, the riches of Damascus. You might say, why are we talking about Damascus? Because when the king of Assyria comes out of Assyria and overflows the bank of the Euphrates River like a flood as it's passing southward towards Israel, it's got to go through Damascus first. That city that shall be turned into a heap of ruins. And you might say, brother, ain't you seen the news? Damascus is looking pretty rough right now. Yeah. Yes, sir. I agree with you. But you wait, there ain't going to be one building standing when this king of Assyria comes. And the spoil of Samaria will be taken away before the king of Assyria. Is this a past king of Assyria? No, this is the king of Assyria mentioned in Nahum 1 and Joel 2 and Micah 5 and Isaiah 14 and many other places. Here he comes. All right, so two different ways in Isaiah 7 and 8 to word the Isaiah 32's prophecy of the length of the fifth seal called a year and some days. And let's look at Hosea 5, verses 13 and 15, 13 through 15. This is Father saying, I'm coming by myself. I'm not bringing my son. You ain't going to see me, but you are going to feel my presence. And then I'm going to get things started, get Gog heading the right way. I'm going to make sure all my angels know. Even Michael has to stand up, but I ain't letting him do nothing. Daniel 12. Michael, you're going to stand up because you know this is the appointed time of the end of my people that we've always knew was coming. This is it. Michael stands up, but Michael is not allowed. Any restraint, has been pulled. And Michael is not allowed to try to protect Israel. Not during this day, which shall last almost 3 years. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that's what this is all about. The time of Jacob's trouble coming upon Israel. All right, read verses 14 and 15. For I will be like a lion to Ephraim, and like a young lion to the house of Judah. That covers all 12 tribes, really. Even I, will tear them and go away. I will take them away. Sound like Matthew? You catching on? You catching on, brothers and sisters? What's meant by the taking away? One taken, one left. One taken, one left. I will tear them and go away. I will take them away, and no one shall rescue. I will return again to my place. That's what God's saying, going back to heaven. But while he's here, that Joel 2 shaking and a quaking, that Isaiah 13 shaking and a quaking, right? Isaiah 13:13a. But yeah, just like Joel 2 says, the earth's going to be shaking and a quaking ahead of Gog's army, but the land of Israel shall look like the Garden of Eden before Gog. Okay? I will return again to my place. That's probably about the time the earth stops shaking, till they acknowledge their offense. When's that? Revelation 16:17. Then they will seek my face, talking about by the end of the day of the Lord. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. So, Father comes by himself, unseen, but the world is a shaking and a quaking at the presence of God. Again, that's the shaking of Joel 2. Now, what is the event of the sixth seal? It's the start to the day of the Lord. Father will visit his flock. His presence will be felt. This will begin the pouring of the cup spoken of in Jeremiah 25, verses 15 through 38. Let's go there now. I hope there's at least a few people out there on the planet who speak English and is enjoying this study. I can use some words of encouragement, so if you are, give me a thumbs up. If you have questions, please ask. Jeremiah 25. You got to break it up into past and future. Verses 1 through 14. You see this? This is talking about the 70 years of captivity of the nation of Israel in Baghdad, Babylon. That's past. 70 years are determined. Interesting how Father does this. In verse 15, we begin our generation at the end of the age when now it's time to judge the nations. Right? The judging of the world begins at the house of God, says Peter, and that's what we see. Even in Daniel 11 itself. Now, the judging during the day of the Lord, right, the wrath of God, starts in verse 15 and all the way to the end of the chapter. Okay? This is the 72nd half of the 70th week of Daniel. This is the day of the Lord. This is that 3-year period, just under 3 years I've been talking about. That's what this is, the second half of the 70th week, not the 70 years of captivity. It's interesting how Father tied that all together. And you see the hit list of God. I used to call it the hit list of Jesus when he comes back. No, that's not true. This is the hit list of just God in general throughout the entire 3-year period. Okay, that's a better way of wording it. Right? Boom. Who gets hit first? Jerusalem. Spank, spank, spank. In the cities of Judah. Its kings and its princes to make them a desolation. Remember Daniel 9:24, the determined desolations on Israel and the world and the nations. But Israel drinks of the cup first. Right? Especially those first 5 trumpets out of the 7 trumpets. A lot of that's dealing with Israel. And then who gets to drink first? Just like you see in Daniel 11:40 through 45. Boom! The people of Egypt, who no longer have an army to protect them, get abused by the staff of punishment, Gog the Assyrian. And then between Gog the Assyrian and then by the 7th bowl battle of the great day of God Almighty, when Jesus is going to kill Gog the Assyrian and destroy and uproot his army and his kingdom and steal back everything that belongs to him. That's why Jesus comes like a thief in the night at the seventh bowl, not to be confused with the entire day of the Lord that comes like a thief in the night at the sixth seal. Hallelujah. But here you see the nations that shall drink between both phases of the day of the Lord. All of these nations shall be judged. And you might say, well, isn't he coming to judge the whole world? Yep, that's why this is written the way it is right here. All the kings of the north, far and near, one with another, and all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. That's America, brothers and sisters. And then guess who's saved for last on God's hit list? Babylon the Great, Baghdad, Iraq, Shishak, Shinar, land of the Chaldeans, saved for last. Babylon has fallen, has fallen. So, hopefully somebody was blessed by the understanding of Jeremiah 25. This is the curse of the Song of Moses. What is the entire day of the Lord? Now, here's something interesting I didn't learn till a few days ago. This is this first sign, right? The first sign in the sun, moon, and stars, which includes the heavens and the earth shaking at the presence of Father, or you can say God. It's actually in Jeremiah 13, which I have right here for you. It's actually called, this first sign, the shadow of death. When the darkness falls, and a lot of that has to do with the fog of war, right? Smoke rolling and just making the day and the night just as black as you can imagine. The day and the night, blocking out all sunlight, all moonlight, all starlight, everything. And the Bible calls this the shadow of death. And what is Father saying to Israel and the world? What statement is Father trying to make when he makes everything black when his presence comes? When he comes out of heaven, like Hosea 5 says, and visits his flock, and he sees Israel and he sees the nations as well. And Father will be back with his son in 3 years, right? Just under 3 years. But here at the sixth seal, Father is here. And guess what? Father's talking about the covenant of death of Isaiah 28:18, which gets signed at Daniel 11:23 back at the first seal. So Israel decides they don't need to worry about what God wants. They're more interested in working out peace agreements with their neighbors, right? So they signed the covenant of death of Daniel 11:23 at the first seal. So Father says, I'm going to give you good counsel and bad counsel so you can have a chance to rethink what you're doing. And I'm going to let you listen to some Christians as you're beating them up. I'm going to let you listen to the two witnesses. I'm going to let you listen to the Antichrist. I'm going to let you listen and consider the thoughts of the false prophet. I'm going to let you listen to the image that shall speak and give wicked counsel. I'm going to let you, Israel, hear all of that stuff, and then by the end of the fifth seal, you'll have made up your mind as far as I'm concerned. And then I'm going to bring hell on earth upon you, Israel, and I'm going to spank you, spank you, spank you. The Bible says in Zechariah 13, let's go there right now. In Zechariah 13, and of course Daniel 12:7 as well, Father tells his children the bad news. He's told Israel thousands of years in advance the bad news. Right? When Father uses Gog the Assyrian to strike the inheritance of my shepherd, my companion, the man who is my companion, the man who is the shepherd, capital S, capital C, it's Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Father's going to strike his inheritance and the sheep will be scattered. Remember the taking away from the land by Gog the Assyrian and his army? Okay. And here's the result. 2/3 of Israel during this 3-year period is going to die. 1/3 shall be left in it. That means going out, being taken away into bondage. You got to go to other passages in the Bible. And then Jesus, like a roaring lion, will lead the 1/3 of Israel, which is primarily young men and women and the precious children, will be brought back by Jesus and followed by the armies of heaven, bringing the 1/3 of mortal Israel back to be his people. Okay, but 1/3, but 2/3 shall die during this day of the Lord period. But that first 6 trumpets. Got it? And again, do we know that Israel won't take that chance, that opportunity to listen to the good counsel? Do we know it? Does it pain me to say it? I used to say, well, there's at least a 1% chance they'll listen, but after reconsidering 2 Thessalonians 2 and the 42 months of the falling away, and we're told, let no man deceive you, that must happen before Jesus comes. Now I realize that Father is telling us that they won't take that opportunity. They just won't. And that's sad. So 2 out of every 3 people in Israel today, I'm not calling for it. I pray for Israel. Do you hear me? I'm not calling for it. I'm not wishing it to happen. Oh, goody, hurry up and happen so Jesus can come back. Okay, you better be somebody who would help Israel if you could. You better lead as many Israelis to the truth as you can now. That goes for me too. Save as many as you can. Tell them to get out of there. Don't be within the borders of Israel when the day of the Lord starts. And you better flee to the place prepared by God right after the abomination of desolation takes place. Warn as many as you can, but the Bible gives us the stats, brothers and sisters. So does the Song of Moses. All right, so that's the sign of the shadow of death, which is the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars. That's the official title, and you see that in Jeremiah 13. We're getting ready to look at that. Let's go over all of these passages real fast in regards to reading about the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars, which occurs when Father comes and he pushes, he draws, he puts the hook in the jaw of Gog the Assyrian and the hired razor flying the bee army and says, don't hesitate, you want it, you know it, come on down. Come down that Jordan River Valley. Let's see, if you want to go west to Amman, east to Jerusalem, I'm going to put the desire in your heart. You want Jerusalem. Now is the appointed time of the end. Now, nothing's going to save Gog the Assyrian and his army and all who take the mark of the beast. Just because Father calls you his army for a temporary period of time do not think that you're going to be saved. That it's a good thing you're being used by Father. That's not true at all. Revelation 6. You're familiar with that more than likely. Whoops. Okay. So when you're studying the 6th seal passage, right? When you're studying this, you're having the same thoughts in your mind as I had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I used to wrestle with this passage. Is this talking about the 7th bowl? Is this talking about the 6th seal? It's found in the 6th seal. Or is it covering many months? What's it doing? What's going on? Are we literally going to see signs at the 6th seal? How does it relate to Matthew 24? I wrestled with it. But it feels good to have the correct understanding. Brothers and sisters, this is all about the day of the Lord, right? That lasts for just under 3 years. It comes a year and some days after the 5th seal abomination of desolation event. So it's talking about the whole thing, but all of these things are going to happen at the 6th seal, except for, watch. I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, right? That's Joel 2's earthquake. Now you're going to see as we go through these passages that I have for you under the sixth seal, you're going to see this earthquake and shaking of the earth mentioned more than just right here and more than just in Joel 2. But here it is here. This is talking about an earthquake at the sixth seal. This is not talking about Revelation 16's verses 17 through 21's worst earthquake in human history. That's not what this earthquake is talking about. Okay? This is the sixth seal quaking of the land of Israel ahead of Gog the Assyrian's army as it's passing through the land, destroying Israel and taking away their people into captivity, right? Not done in one day. It takes years. And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. This is talking about the sixth seal. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. This is the shaking of heaven that you're going to read about. Now listen to me, brothers and sisters, in case you're doubting me or doubting part of what I'm saying. When we read about the shaking of the heavens and the shaking of the earth in passages that are obviously talking about the king of Assyria coming upon the land, you'll see that, yep, sure enough, this is talking about the sixth seal. Start to the day of the Lord. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. Okay? And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, and the mighty men, every slave and every free man, you could also read about this in Isaiah 2, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. Remember, this is the presence of Father when he comes by himself. But the day is a almost 3-year period. And said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne. Okay, there's that famous and that always separates the two phases of the day of the Lord. And from the wrath of the Lamb, that's when Jesus comes and visits his flock, but not just to visit. He appears in glory and comes as king and as judge and as Lord, right? That will be at the climax to the day of the Lord. Now, this 17 is not talking about simply the climax to the day of the Lord. This is talking about at the sixth seal, the day of the Lord comes. That's all this means. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Now, what is meant by who is able to stand? Right? We're talking about Malachi 3, Malachi 4. Who is able to stand? It does not mean who shall remain alive. It's not what that means. Who shall be able to stand means when both phases of the day of the Lord are over, right? Father comes, spank his children. Jesus comes at the seventh bowl, judges Israel and the nations, but he comes as Israel's redeemer at that point. Okay, so who shall be able to be left standing, either immortal or mortal, and serve Jesus in his kingdom? Okay, so that's what that means. Who's going to be standing and serving Jesus in his kingdom? Be it in an immortal body or a mortal body. And you'd be surprised how many people don't understand that there's going to be billions of mortals alive in Jesus's kingdom. Now, it may only start out with a few 100,000 mortals, because you don't just have mortal Israelis, you have mortals from all 7 continents left alive. And if you don't know that, or if you don't understand that, go look at Isaiah 66 verses 18 through 21, and it'll help you understand that there's going to be those from all 7 continents who, here's a phrase that you need to learn, escapes judgment. And nations will be left a determined size remnant based on their actions in the last 2,000 years or 3,000 years, and also their actions during the 5th seal. Are you plotting to take Jesus' inheritance? Are you praying for Israel? Is your nation praying for Israel? Is your nation taking the mark of the beast? You know, your actions will determine as a nation your size remnant left alive to enter the millennial reign of Christ. So that's what that means. But it doesn't mean whether you're alive at his coming, or whether you come back as a soul with Jesus to be joined to your new body. That just simply means serving Jesus in his kingdom, either immortal or mortal. I hope that helped someone in regards to Revelation 6. Let's go to Amos 8, verse 9, a very good passage to start learning about the sixth seal, appointed time of the end, the start to the day of the Lord. Amos 8. We're not going to read the whole chapter, but this is the appointed time of the end. Do you see it? The end has come upon my people. This in that day, right? The day of the Lord. This is the appointed time of the end of Daniel 11, 40 through 45. Ezekiel 7, right? When Gog the Assyrian, the last Antichrist to ever, passed through the land of Israel again. Here he comes. Joel 2, right? Which verses is it talk about the sign and the sun, moon, and stars? It's verse 9. So let's go on down to verse 9 at the appointed time of the end. And it shall come to pass in that day, right, the day of the Lord, that almost 3-year period, says the Lord God, that I will make the sun go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in broad daylight. Okay? And you keep reading, and you read about this. I will bring sackcloth on every waist and baldness on every head, right? And its end like a bitter day. So this is not talking about the return of Jesus when everything's over within a few days, as far as the battle of the great day of God Almighty. This is about the entire day of the Lord period, which is the wrath of God. And some people on that subject will say, well, don't you know 1 Thessalonians 5:9? We are not appointed for wrath. You're right. You're not appointed for the wrath of God. You're serving him during the Great Tribulation, and you're pleading his case. You're giving good counsel. Israel and the world needs to hear the good counsel. That's why you're left here through it, but you're not appointed to the wrath of God. Right? You're not the reason why Father is angry, but you are going to perform a great service during the Great Tribulation. You must be here. You must give the good counsel. And brothers and sisters, if the church can get that understanding about we must plead his case and give the good counsel, if they understood it, there would be no bickering going on within the church about the timing of the rapture, because it is a last day event. All that belong to Jesus will be gathered to him at that time. Even Martha knew that. Okay? 2 Thessalonians 2 tells you that. All right, we're not going to get into the timing of the rapture in this study. Okay? So, this is the sixth seal, start to the day of the Lord, when Father comes. Remember Hosea 5? When Father comes and his presence is felt. And Israel will know to get on the ground and start crying like you've never cried before. Pray, pray, pray. Dress in sackcloth. Roll around. Get to the bunkers. You probably need to do this while you're in the bunkers, because hundreds of thousands of rockets and missiles and mortars are being launched into Israel. Not to mention aircraft ordnance being dropped. All right? Israel is just black as soot from the ash and from the smoke of fires. And the Bible says the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, won't even go out to fight. They can't. I mean, imagine the earth shaking at the same time as you're undergoing that type of bombardment. All the IDF young people can do is just try to seek shelter and duck and cover. I don't wish this on Israel, brothers and sisters. It's coming. Somebody needs to warn them. Hallelujah. Okay, so the appointed time of the end in Daniel 11 and Amos 8. And here we go. The first sign in the sun, moon, and stars in Joel 2. Capital O. There we go. Here we go. This is the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars. Do not confuse this with the sign in the sun, moon, and stars in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. Don't do it. This is the sixth seal, Revelation 6. First sign in the sun, moon, and stars. Here it is. I call it, or I should say Jeremiah calls it, the sign of the shadow of death. A day of darkness and gloominess, right? It says day of the Lord. A day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, like the morning clouds spread over the mountains. And then here comes Gog the Assyrians, hired razor flying the bee army mentioned in Joel 2, coming out of the north, overflowing the banks of the Euphrates River like a flood. A people come great and strong, the like of whom has never been, nor will there ever be. So what does that mean? Joel 2 is last days. No one could ever mistake it for a past historical event. Got it? Nor will there ever be any such after them, even for many successive generations. In other words, in this generation, there'll be none like this. Right? And this proves we're talking about the start of the day of the Lord and not the return of Christ. Right here. Did you see that? Here's how you prove it, brothers and sisters. Because the land of Israel looks like the Garden of Eden before this army. If this was talking about the battle of the great day of God Almighty, here in chapter 2, at least in these verses of chapter 2, it wouldn't say this. This is virgin territory. This is war breaking out on Israel for the first time. Got it? So, Joel 2 verses 1 through 3 talks about the darkness that's going to befall the earth in the land of Israel at the appearing of, not appearing, let me rephrase that, at the coming of Father's presence. No one's going to see Father. You're not going to see his cherub riding on the swift clouds, but you're going to feel his presence. Joel 2, verse 10. Let's read about more darkness. Here we go, staying in the same chapter. The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble. Remember what I told you about the earth shaking and the heavens shaking? Right? The earth quakes before them. Before who? Gog's army. The heavens tremble, the sun and moon grow dark, and the stars diminish their brightness. The Lord, are you listening? Gives voice before what? The Lord gives voice before what? His army. His camp is very great. For strong is the one who executes his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can endure it? You know, on the subject of the day of the Lord and the great and terrible day of the Lord, I used to think years ago that there was a difference, right? One was phase 1, one was phase 2. There are 2 phases to the day of the Lord, but it's all those titles such as terrible, great and terrible, awesome, unusual, amazing. It's all referring to the entire day of the Lord. There are 2 phases, but the terrible or very terrible or great or very great, that's just referring to the day of the Lord as a whole. But it does consist of 2 phases. Now watch this right here. This is interesting. This is Malachi 4, and it's interesting that it's in verse 14. Who knows, right? It says, so rend your heart and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and of great kindness, and he relents from doing harm. Who knows if he will turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him? That makes it sound like Father here is saying, oh, Israel, you still got a shot. You still got a chance. You turn back to me, you won't have to undergo the day of the Lord. Do it before I have Jesus loose the sixth seal. But we can't deny what we read in 2 Thessalonians 2 in regards to Christians, the church, being told when Jesus is coming. So Jesus cannot come, according to 2 Thessalonians 2, until after the fifth seal abomination of desolation event, and after the 42 months of great tribulation and falling away from the faith that begins at the fifth seal and ends at the seventh trumpet. So until after the seventh trumpet, Jesus cannot come. That's exactly what all the scriptures tell us. So why does Father say this? Because he wants them to repent so he can relent. But yet he tells the Christians, I'm sorry, but I can go ahead and tell you all right now, they're not going to accept my offer, and you're not going to see Jesus until after the 42 months. I'm interested on what you all think about that. Now, back to the first seal sign. That was Joel 2. Let's go to Micah 3:6. I need to pick up the pace. Micah 3:6. The first sign in the sun, moon, and stars. Therefore you shall have night without vision, you shall have darkness without divination. The sun shall go down on the prophets, and the day shall be dark for them. Okay? First seal. Excuse me. Let me slow down. First sign in the sun, moon, and stars. It's at the sixth seal, and it's found in verse 6. Very interesting. Amos 5:18 through 20. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord, for what good is the day of the Lord to you? Well, the only good thing about it is Jesus can't come until it happens, so bring it on, right? It will be darkness and not light. It will be as though a man fled from a lion and a bear met him. Let's keep reading. For as though he went into the house, leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and not light? Is it not very dark with no brightness in it? Now, does that mean for the whole world, or does it mean for Israel? I would say Israel and possibly its neighbors, but I don't think we're talking about darkness over the whole planet for 3 years as a result of Father visiting. I don't think so. I think we're really just talking about the land. Maybe from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River basin, but probably more just above Israel. Which one was that? Was that Micah? No, that was Amos 5. So let's go to Ezekiel 34:12. And I think we're going to get our answer about how far does the darkness spread. I know Egypt's going to be affected. Ezekiel 34:12. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. And as a shepherd seeks out his flock on the day he is among his scattered sheep, that's Hosea 5, brothers and sisters. That's Father coming to visit his complacent women. So I will seek out my sheep and deliver them from all the places where they were scattered on a cloudy and dark day. All right, so verse 12 is talking about the seventh bowl appearing of Jesus. But you might say, well, why do you have it listed under the sixth seal sign? Because watch how verse 12 ends. Deliver them from the places where they were scattered. See that? Where they were scattered on a cloudy and dark day. So the cloudy and dark day this is just simply a reference to the entire day of the Lord, but it's saying in verse 12 is as a result of the scattering that will take place during the day of the Lord, that almost 3-year period, it'll conclude with Jesus separating the sheep from the goats. Does that make sense? So remember when I've got it listed here, Ezekiel 34:12, I probably should change that to 34:12b so you remember we're just talking about the last half of that verse. Because the main subject is Jesus coming during the wrath of the Lamb and redeeming Israel from slavery. So yeah, before I upload that, I need to change that to 12b. Ezekiel 30, verses 1 through 5. Yeah, you can see it really here in verse 3. For the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near. It will be a day of clouds, the time of the Gentiles. All right, let's move on. Jeremiah 13, verses 15 through 17. I like this passage because this is where I get what I believe is the title to the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars, the shadow of death. Jeremiah 13, verses 15 through 17. My computer needs a break. There we go. Jeremiah 13. (15 through 17). Pride precedes captivity. When we get to the fourth trumpet sign in the sun, moon, and stars, you'll understand what that's talking about. Hear and give ear. Do not be proud, for the Lord has spoken. Give glory to the Lord your God before he causes darkness and before your feet stumble on the dark mountains. And we got another 6 here to start the sixth seal, day of the Lord. Verse 16, give glory to the Lord your God before he causes darkness and before your feet stumble on the dark mountains. And while you are looking for light, he turns it into the shadow of death and makes it dense darkness. Then you have the weeping and the rolling around in the ashes, the appointed time of the end. So do not take the mark of the beast, Israel, and cry out to Jesus. Hallelujah. Oh, the shadow of death. Where's that at? Right here. He turns it into, right, here we go. This is the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars. He turns it into the shadow of death. And you may not think, or you might not have thought that was actually a title to that day, to that sign, unless you understood the covenant with death of Isaiah 28:18, which is the league agreement of Daniel 11:23. If you fully understood how angry Father gets at the covenant with death signing, then you would understand that as far as Father is concerned, he considers this first sign in the sun, moon, and stars as the sign of the shadow of death. And he brings, right, darkness upon the land. And interestingly enough, what happens at the seventh trumpet? When Father decides to begin the uprooting of the beast kingdom, he chases them with darkness. It'll be their turn. All right, Jeremiah 23, 11 through 12. For both prophet and priest are profane. Yes, in my house I have found their wickedness, says the Lord. Therefore, when Father says that, somebody's about to get it. Therefore, their way shall be to them like slippery ways. In the darkness they shall be driven on and fall in them. Remember the stumbling? For I will bring disaster on them, the year of their punishment, says the Lord. Okay? Darkness they shall be driven on and fall in them, in the darkness. Okay, let's go to Zephaniah 1, 14 through 15. through 15. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens quickly. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. There the mighty men shall cry out, especially the IDF. That day is a day of wrath. Remember, Israel drinks of the cup of madness first. So these mighty men, unless it's talking about the King of the South alliance, which gets crushed first, I think this is talking about in regards to the mighty men crying out, the IDF. I don't wish it on them. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of devastation and desolation, a day, well, that right there sounds like determined desolations, don't it? A day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet and alarm against the fortified cities and against the high towers of Israel. Right? They walk around like blind men. Here we go. So that's exactly what God's talking about at the appointed time of the end, the start to the day of the Lord. Now let's finish up the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars with Isaiah 13:13. This is a chapter you got to be careful when you're incorporating into the study of the day of the Lord. I wrestled with this for 2 or 3, 4 years when I first started my studies of the 70th week of Daniel. First of all, what is the subject of Isaiah 13? It is Revelation 17 and 18. It is the fall of Babylon at the end of the age. That not in the past. This is not the Medes and the Persians coming against Nebuchadnezzar's family's dynasty. No, this is about the same thing Isaiah 14 is talking about. The same thing Isaiah 7 and 8 is talking about. This is talking about the wrath of the Lamb when Jesus leads the armies of heaven against the beast kingdom and saves Shishak, the land of Shinar, the land of the Chaldeans, for last, the headquarters of the beast kingdom. Saved for last. Babylon has fallen. Right? This is Jesus leading the armies of heaven as commander of the Lord's army. That's what the subject is here. But when you get down to verse 13, it's talking about the entire 3 years. When I say that, you need to remember that I mean less than 3 years, right? According to Isaiah 16's prophecy of when will Jordan get its punishment. This now in verse 13, it's talking about the first and the third sign in the sun and moon, or you could think of it as the 2 phases, right? 2 phases. But in the middle of the 2 phases, you have the 4th trumpet sign in the sun, moon, and stars, which we'll get to in a second. Therefore, here we go. So the main subject is the wrath of the Lamb on Babylon, the great city, saved for last. But within this chapter about that, we get this. Therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth will move out of her place. And here comes the 2 phases, just like it was given to us at the end of Revelation 6, 6 seal passage. You're about to see the big old fat and right between the 2 phases. So the earth's going to shake, the heavens are going to tremble in the wrath of the Lord of hosts and in the day of his fierce anger. These are 2 more titles, but in Revelation 6, New King James Version, phase 1 is not called the wrath of the Lord of hosts. It's called the face of him who sits on the throne. And in Revelation 6, it's called, phase 2 is called the wrath of the Lamb when Jesus appears. Here, when Jesus appears, it's called in the day of his fierce anger. Right? That's when he sends his son to finish the cleanup process. Do you think it was bad? This is Father talking now. I'm paraphrasing and I'm speaking for him, which can be dangerous, but I feel led by the Holy Spirit to do so. Father's saying, you think it was rough for 3 years? When I was pouring out my wrath, you ain't seen nothing yet. The fierce anger part of this day of the Lord, I'm going to let my son handle it, and he's really upset. You nations who came against his inheritance, you came against both of his flocks, all right? You killed maybe millions of Christians, God forbid. Okay, now Jesus is going to get some vengeance during the day of his fierce anger, wrath of the Lamb. Okay, so here in verse 13, 13a, right, which is right there, that's phase 1, and here is phase 2, wrath of the Lamb. But the reason why I incorporated this into the first sign in the sun, moon, and stars is because of this. Shake the heavens and the earth will move out of her place. So this isn't talking about darkness, but this is referencing the earth a quaking and a shaking at the head of as Gog the Assyrian attacks. And then this is basically saying, I'm also going to shake the earth again, but this time it'll be the worst earthquake in human history. Revelation 16 verses 17 through 21, at the wrath of the Lamb, at the wrath of the Lamb at the appearing of Jesus Christ in glory. Brothers and sisters, that's it for the first seal, first sign in the sun, moon, and stars. Right? The second one will be fast. We can get through this fast. Okay, fourth trumpet. And we're going to read Revelation 8:12. But what does this mean? 1/3 of Israel, mainly young men and women, along with the precious children, will begin to go into bondage at the fourth trumpet. So at the fourth trumpet, you're going to get a sign in the sun, moon, and stars, and we're going to read it, and you're going to see that it talks about 1/3, and it represents Israel getting ready to have 1/3 of it go into captivity. Remember Zechariah 13, verses 7 through 9? Okay, so let's look at Revelation 8:12. This is where we first see, well, it's the only place really where we see this sign in the entire Holy Bible. But it happens to be in verse 12, and that's very interesting. Here we go. Then the fourth angel sounded, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars. Does that mean they're actually sliced? No, of course not. It means from our vantage point, they ain't shining, because it says, so that the 1/3 of them were darkened. And 1/3 of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. 1/3. That probably means the last 1/3 of the day and the first 1/3 of the night. It's just complete darkness. To signify what? That the day of the Lord has started? No, it started back at the 6th seal. Right? So what is this signifying? Well, I believe, because so many scriptures says that in the last days, 1/3 of Israel is going to go into captivity, into bondage. I think that's what that means. It's warning Israel, oh, you wish the day of the Lord was over by the fourth trumpet. We're just getting started. Now it's time for the 3 woes, right? I don't wish this on Israel. Let's read Ezekiel 5:12 to get our answer. See that? Verse 12. Let's go to verse 12 of Ezekiel 5, and we'll see what this second sign means. What should the priests and Levites of Israel, right, get from this? Well, Ezekiel 5, verse 12. gives us our answer. It's not a coincidence. 1/3 of you shall die of pestilence. Remember, this is exactly what Zechariah 13 says, which is the chapter before the famous Zechariah 14 passage. So before you can have Zechariah 14, you got to have the events of Zechariah 13. 1/3 of you shall die of the pestilence and be consumed with famine in your midst. 1/3 shall fall by the sword, and you might be like, where is the bondage at? And I will scatter another third to all the winds, and I will draw out a sword after them. So I will scatter another third to all the winds. That doesn't mean you're dead, but your corpse is kind of floating around in the whirlwinds. That's not what that means. That means you're going to be scattered. You're removed, taken away from the land, and taken into bondage. And you read other passages in the Old Testament, you find out a lot of these people are the precious children of Israel. And you might say, brother, you're a sick human being to scare children like that. I'm giving warning. I'm at least trying. I'm trying to give warning of what's coming. Like a true watchman on the wall should. And you might say, well, brother, you've already said that because of 2 Thessalonians 2, they're not going to repent, and this is coming. Well, you got time to A, get out of Israel, or B, at the fifth seal, make sure you get to the place prepared by God. So go to a local church in Israel and become part of the church and abide in Jesus Christ. And you'll be okay. Accept him as your Savior, Lord, and Master, and obey his commandments, and have the testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hallelujah. Okay, so the second sign in the sun, moon, and stars is to warn Israel that 1/3 of them, and it's from God, and they're about to go into captivity. It's a shame that it has to deal with the precious children. Micah 1:16. Let's look there real fast. Make yourself bald and cut off your hair because of your precious children. Enlarge your baldness like an eagle, for they shall go from you into captivity. The good news is Jesus brings them back like a roaring lion, right? Brings them back to their homes, brings them back to Jerusalem. And they shall serve him and be sheltered and dwell safely under his reign, right? So there are good news for the precious children. They're going to be brought back by Jesus no matter where they were scattered. And we're not talking about being changed into immortals. Absolutely not. They will. These are the foolish virgins. These are the children of the foolish virgins. These are children who do not have a personal relationship with Jesus, but they're mark free, and they've been raised in households that will never bow a knee to the Antichrist, and they're faithful to Yah, the Holy One of Israel, but they're not being glorified, but they are being brought back by Jesus. Zechariah 13:7-9, that's the chapter right before Zechariah 14. This is one of the main chapters that gives Israel the bad news of what's coming. And they better turn to Jesus now or get out of Israel. Zechariah 13:7-9. The striking of the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered, right? See this? 1/3 shall be left in it. I will bring 1/3 through the fire. And this is the purging of Isaiah 1. See this? This is the purging away of their sins, cleaning Israel up. They're not glorified. They may get glorified at the great white throne judgment, but they're going to get clean. They're going to get washed clean the hard way. I don't mean washed clean as meaning that they are in immortal bodies, but they're going to be washed clean enough to where they can actually perform a service to Jesus in and around his temple during the millennium. They got to get cleaned up, and a lot of them are youth. But 1/3 shall be, and when it says shall be left in it, means after Jesus brings them back, they will be standing serving the Lord in his kingdom. Hallelujah. Note, this is an overall note, not a second sign in the sun, moon, and stars note. But my note, just overall, the overall length of time of the day of the Lord, both phases, is given to us within the study of Jordan's punishment. From the time Jordan gets out of punishment at the 6th seal until the time she gets her punishment at the hands of Jesus shall be less than 3 years. I'll take you there real quick. It's not the only place to go to get the full understanding of the length. Not the length of the 5th seal, the length of the day of the Lord overall. And it's not 42 months. The Great Tribulation is 42 months. It starts back at the 5th seal. So let's go to Isaiah 16, where you get part of this understanding. This is talking about the final judgment on the country of Jordan. There's other places you can go to get the rest of the understanding. Probably, I think it's Jeremiah 49. Of course, Jeremiah 25 talks about the nations that think they're going to go unpunished, and the Lord says, you shall not go unpunished. In other words, when Jesus comes, if you ain't been punished yet, you will be then. But Isaiah 16 is where we're at, and right here, this is the word of the Lord, which the Lord has spoken concerning Moab since that time. But now the Lord has spoken, saying, within 3 years, so less than 3 years, as the years of a hired man, the glory of Moab will be despised with all that great multitude, talking about the beast kingdom, and the remnant will be very small and feeble. This is the remnant that Jesus will permit to live from the country of Jordan within his kingdom. Because Jesus judges the nations, he decides what size remnant they have. If you don't understand that, you need to spend more time reading about the judgments of the nations throughout the second half of the Old Testament. Jordan, of course, Moab representing the northern half of Jordan, right? They'll be judged by Jesus less than 3 years later. Remember, Daniel 11:40 through 45, Jordan gets out of punishment when the day of the Lord starts. When the appointed time of the end starts, Jordan gets out of punishment. They don't get punished till the wrath of the Lamb when Jesus appears and judges the nations. And this gives you the length of the day of the Lord. Oh, Jordan, you think you're getting out of punishment? Mm-hmm. Yep, you just wait. Jesus is coming. Battle of the great day of God Almighty will happen within 3 years. So that's how I get the day of the Lord will last less than 3 years. Let's end this lesson by looking at the third sign in the sun, moon, and stars. You knew I was going to give out on you, brothers and sisters, because I'm getting tired and you are too. I can't make it to the end. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read about the appearing of Jesus Christ from here down to here, but these verses about the third sign in the sun, moon, and stars, which I have here for you, I'm going to let you look them up on your own time. Praise the Lord. So here we go. Jesus, this is Revelation 16, verses 17 through 21, clarified in chapter 19 of Revelation. This is the return of glorious appearing of Jesus Christ. It's called the day of his coming. Jesus musters his army for battle. And you see that in Isaiah 13. That's the first thing Jesus does when he shows up. Gathers to himself all that belong to him, whether they wake or sleep. All right? That's the mustering of the armies of heaven. The wheat are being taken to the barn prior to the wrath of the Lamb and flaming fire taking vengeance on those who don't know the gospel of Jesus Christ. 1/3 of Israel will be set free from bondage by Jesus and the armies of heaven. The other 2/3 of Israel are what? dead. How do I know that? Zechariah 13. Not, and other passages like Ezekiel 5 through 7. He will shake the heavens and the earth will move out of her place. How do I know that? Well, one of the places we learned that was Isaiah 13:13. It happens here when Father comes invisibly, and that is not a resurrection to life and a rapture. Father's not mustering any armies of heaven at the sixth seal. Do you understand, brothers and sisters? Don't get mad at me. Don't hate me. Don't deny that I'm telling you the truth. God does not muster his army for battle, which is the resurrection to life, that army of Ezekiel 37, and the rapture of those who are alive and remain. That happens at the seventh bowl, glorious appearing coming of Jesus Christ, when he musters his army for battle and they follow him on white horses. All right. When does the seventh bowl, third sign in the sun, moon, and stars, occur? Just under 2,300 days from the first seal league agreement. Wow. How dare I make such a detailed statement? No one knows when Jesus comes. That's not what Daniel 8 says. Daniel 8 says in verses 23 through 25, get it? Verse 23, the start event for the 2,300-day countdown. God is good. And verse 25 is the end event of the 2,300-day countdown. So just under 2,300 days from the first seal league agreement of Daniel 11:23. God is good. I'm going to say that all again, because this is like a parting gift from not from me, from the Holy Spirit to you, because you hung out with me today. I'm going to say that again as a parting gift from the Holy Spirit. I'm being his vocal cords. All right, this 2,300-day countdown from the first seal to the seventh bowl, it's established. It'll be shortened a little bit, says Matthew 24:22, for the sake of the elect. But this established 2,300-day countdown of the first seal found in Daniel 11:23, okay? And it's also the start event is found in Daniel 8:23. And it's the 2,300-day countdown. How long, O Lord? Wow. Now, the seventh bowl is also 1,335 days from the fifth seal, abomination of desolation event. That's found in Daniel 12. That's when the prophet Daniel will get resurrected. 1,335 days following the fifth seal, abomination of desolation event in Jerusalem. But again, Matthew 24:22 says that for the sake of the elect, those days shall be shortened. But we already talked about the bowls of wrath can't be shortened very much. Probably no more than about 5 days. And the number 40 days sounds interesting to me. How long was Jesus weakened and tempted by the devil? 40 days. Are we not to imitate Christ? Something to think about, but no man knows the day or the hour for sure. But I tell you what, we know the hour of the day Jerusalem time that Jesus appears. Brother, you just contradicted yourself. What are you talking about? Isaiah 17:14 and Zechariah 14:7 say that Jesus is going to appear at the evening time, evening tide, right? The time of the offering of the evening sacrifice at twilight is when Jesus will appear. But no man knows the day or the hour that the day of the Lord begins. But we know within a few days window of when he will appear, and he's already given us that in Daniel 8:23 through 25 and Daniel 12 in reference to the 1335-day countdown. That's not in verse 13 of Daniel 12, is it? I don't think so, but I'm going to check just to make sure, because if it is, I'll fall off my chair in front of you. Let's see. I'm getting a little giddy. 1335-day countdown is found in verse 13. I think that's pretty cool. I wouldn't think that was cool if I didn't know the 2300-day countdown starts in verse 23 of Daniel 8 and is mentioned in Daniel 11:23. But because I know all that, I think it's pretty cool that the 1335-day countdown ends. The end event is found in verse 13 of Daniel 12. Praise the Lord. You never cease to amaze me, Word of God. When? Last day of this age. Yes, the seventh bowl is the last day of this age and the start to the millennium and the start to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. The event. Phase 2 of the day of the Lord called the day of Christ. This is the coming of Jesus as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jesus will lead all of his weapons of indignation into battle. Right? Says Jeremiah chapter 50, says Isaiah chapter 13, Jesus will lead all of his weapons of indignation into battle. At the battle of the great day of God Almighty, you may know it as the Battle of Armageddon, and steal back everything that belongs to him and his Father, especially the precious children of Israel. Jesus will sit on the clouds of heaven and judge the nations. Every nation will be left a determined size remnant to enter his kingdom. He may start out with hundreds of thousands of mortals. Again, see Isaiah 66 verses 18 through 21 if you have a problem with that. Also, remember the fact that Gog will be come against the camp of the saints, or someone like Gog from Assyria will come against the camp of the saints at the end of the millennium, right? By the millions means that there are mortals. Those aren't incorruptible family member of God's coming against God's camp of the saints. Those are mortal people. So that proves that there are going to be a lot of mortals born during the millennial reign of Christ. So if you've never thought of it that way, I just helped somebody. Praise God. Jesus will sit on the clouds of heaven and judge the nations. Every nation will be left a determined size remnant to enter his kingdom. And I'll let you read all these passages about the third sign in the sun and moon that occur at the presence of God the Son. Right? One like the Son of Man. When he appears, just like when Father not appeared, but when Father came back at the sixth seal, remember Hosea 5, that's what happened. Well, it's going to happen again, but this will be the worst earthquake of all time as part of the wrath of the Lamb's judgment. And here are all the verses talking about the wrath of the Lamb. Brothers and sisters, we are done. I pray that this was a blessing to somebody. All right? Please share. Please share this video with your friends, with your congregation. You don't even have to tell them you believe it or you believe all of it. Just send it to them. Share. Send the link. Right? Send the link to this video. Now, in regards to this one-page short study you're looking at, I will upload this sometime today to my 70th week folder at keepandshare.com cloud. Keepandshare.com. I'll leave you the link to the folder. I'll leave you the link to this specific file. You can preview it. You can download it. Everything's free. Nothing's for sale. I've got over 300 short studies on the 70th week of Daniel in that folder, and it's alphabetized. It's a 2-page alphabetized listing, and I've been using this cloud for 5 years now, and it is safe. Hallelujah. Brothers and sisters, until I see you again, God bless.